There's the pace that I'm running at, and then there's like the Jesus pace, which is a lot slower and a lot more deliberate. So that's the challenging part is just, how do you show up for people, be present, most importantly in your walk with Jesus, but also like with my wife, with my children. Saying no has always been a challenge.
Well, hey crew, it's Adam. You're listening to The Conversation. Today is episode 278, and I am thrilled. We have my friend Jordan Montgomery here on The Conversation. I'm excited for you to hear it. Friends, regardless of where you are, just know I'm so glad you're tuning in. Each week I do these conversations for you, the listeners, and my hope is in the next 28 or so minutes, my hope is if you're trying to figure out how to make a difference with your life, or you're walking through an pretty part of being human, I want you to know that you are not alone. And I just know today's conversation with Jordan is going to encourage you in so many different ways. Before we go there though, and more than that, I want to give a huge shout out to our partners. Each week, these partners help make the conversation possible. I'm so grateful for them. They're organizations that I know and trust and have known and trust for years, and that's why I want you to know about them as well. Our first partner today is Mission Haiti. Mission Haiti is a nonprofit that I've personally known and supported for over a decade now. And 2 months ago, I went to Haiti for the fourth time to visit Mission Haiti. The work that Mission Haiti does is absolutely amazing. The church I pastor with, we've started 3 different schools there in Haiti. And Mission Haiti's goal is to love Jesus, love others, and make disciples in the country of Haiti. One of their biggest ministries that they do is their student education program, where they provide a Christian education and they provide a warm meal for more than 2,800 kids. Well, my wife and I, we've supported this little girl for years. And on my trip 2 months ago, I got to visit and meet her. Honestly, it's one of the coolest experiences of my life. As a result of seeing that, again, I've known about their partnerships with kids and sponsoring, and we've sponsored kids for years, but actually being able to see firsthand the work that a sponsorship does, friends, I am begging you, I'm not joking, I am begging you to consider sponsoring a student through Mission Haiti yourself. I can promise you it will be one of the greatest investments you ever make. And so not just for the child, but for you personally. So I want to encourage you, go to mission-haiti.org. Again, that's mission-haiti.org and sponsor a child today. Again, it will be one of the best things you do. Our second partner today is Vern-Ity. Vern-Ity Mitsubishi is a growing, employee-owned, faith-based company that strives to deliver dreams and transform lives. And Vern-Ity's goal is excellence in everything that they do. And personally, as someone who has bought 3 different vehicles through Vern-Ity, I can tell you that they do that. I honestly will not even look any place else. The other day, I got one of my favorite messages 2 times in one day. I got 2 messages from 2 different listeners who said, "Hey, Adam, I just bought a vehicle through Vern-Ity, and I'm so grateful that you told me about them because it was an amazing experience, and I love my vehicle." And so again, if you're looking for a car, looking for a truck, a tractor, boat, even a snowmobile, don't look anyplace else, okay? Again, vernity.com. Well, as I've already shared, today on the podcast, we have my friend Jordan Montgomery with us. And Jordan right now is an absolute rising star in the speaking world. Whether it's speaking at a John Maxwell event or it's encouraging WNBA star Caitlin Clark, Jordan seems to be everywhere right now. And so in our conversation, Jordan shares about the highs and kind of the cool parts about what God's doing through his life right now. He also shares about some of the hard things that are taking place. And then he turns the tables on me and he begins to ask me questions about what I'm learning in this season of my own life, which was surprising, but I ended up loving it. Jordan also shares how he's intentionally tried to balance saying yes and saying no. We talk about the art of encouragement. Also, only on the podcast, Jordan and I honor 2 specific people in each of our lives who have been encouragers to us. And so whether you're a leader, a parent, a coach, someone seeking inspiration, this episode is for you. And on that note, sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. So, Jordan, we always hear the highlight reels. Is there a current unpretty part of your life right now? Stress, grief, jadedness, whatever you're willing to share. Is there a current this is rough?
Yeah, the unpretty part. There are a lot of unpretty parts. One thing that I'm really rubbing up against right now is just meeting the demands of like cool opportunities, mostly like professional opportunities, mostly in my world to speak at the expense of life at home. And so I just feel like I'm always living in that tension and like,
Jeez.
I don't know, man. I think what we typically hear is somebody say, "Oh yeah, I'm saying no more than I've ever said no," and like the pain of saying no and missing out on some really cool stuff is heavy, and like, um, so yeah, like I am saying no to stuff, and the pain of that can be heavy at times. But honestly, man, I might have shared this with you. Um, I don't know if we've talked about this. I missed my daughter's birthday because I said yes to a speaking engagement in Rhode Island, and not that long ago. And I sat in the Chicago airport. I thought I could make it back. Is the short version of this story. Like, did we talk about this? Did I share this?
No, I
Okay.
haven't heard this.
So I thought I could make it back. This cool opportunity comes up. My wife is the one who actually gets all of the speaking inquiries, ironically. So she brings it to me and she's like, "Hey, you're gonna like this." I'm like, "Yeah, I do like this. It's a great audience. It's just it's like the perfect fit when we look at the profile of an opportunity." And but she's like, "Well, there's a problem." And she said, "It lands on the morning of Audrey's birthday." So we live in Iowa. The event is in Rhode Island, but I'm speaking first thing in the morning, like it's Eastern time. So I start to justify, right? I'm like, well, here's the deal. Like, I could catch like a midday flight. They're an hour ahead. I'm getting an hour back, but and I'll be back by like, evening. I get like the whole night with Audrey. She's going to be at school anyway. I said, "So what do you think?" And she's like, "Well, I know what I would do. I know what you should do, but I'm going to let this be your decision." And I'm like, "Oh, come on." And I'm like, "Okay." So I go through the whole thing and I'm like, "Yeah, but like I could be back." And she's like, "Well, I know what I would do. I know what you should do. I'm going to let it be your decision." So I say yes, Adam. I'm like,
Of course.
"Well, I'm going, man, because I can do both, right? I can do both. I can just do both, and it's going to be great, and everybody will be happy." And I did both. I tried to do both. I do this deal in Rhode Island. I'm flying back. Everything's fine, right? I'm like, "See, I told Ashley I caught a morning flight after my gig." I'm landing in Chicago and there's like a massive snowstorm. Like kind of unexpected, hit earlier than we thought it was going to hit. Anyway, it rocked. All flights canceled. Can't even get like rental cars out because they're all booked. So I called my wife and my daughter. Called my wife's phone to talk to my daughter from the Chicago airport. It's like, dude, if you ever want to just feel the full weight of a mistake, just sit in a dirty airport by yourself. Like my whole family's gathered around the kitchen table. And dude, like I got to tell my daughter, like, "I'm missing your birthday because I said yes to a paycheck that I didn't need for a group of people I did not know. And that got in the way of my ability to celebrate and be with somebody I love so much on one of their most important days." And so that just like, if you ask like the ugly part of life that I'm dealing with is like, yeah, it's that, man. Like I just, that tension of really leading well at home, winning at home, still maintaining a business, still being a part of some cool stuff, but choosing to be a family man with a business and not a businessman with a family. And so just learning a lot about what it looks like to lead well at home. And as much as you think you can have that figured out, like I'm like, I don't need like somebody to talk to me about that. Like I know, I know how to show up. Like I know what God's asked of me, as a husband and a father. And it's like, yet, I still fall into that from time to time. And so anyway, if you're asking me to share like something that's just been like ugly, like something I just was not proud of, like there's a moment, so, it's like, "Hey, welcome to the show. Here's some lessons on what not to do." The Jordan Montgomery edition.
Jordan, honestly, thanks for sharing that. You're honestly going right into my next question. your star is rising right now so fast. Like, I'm saying that for you as a friend in the coolest way. And whether it's speaking at a John Maxwell event with professional athletes, it's just been so cool to see your star rising. Has the ride been fun, hard, challenging, miserable, awesome? Like, how has that journey been? Has it been like, what's been fun and satisfying, and what's been, you already mentioned it, what's been really hard or unfulfilling? I'm just gonna let you take that. Like,
Yeah.
your stars rising. What's been fun and cup filling, and what's been like, gosh, I'm struggling with this. I'm wrestling with this.
That's a great question. First, I would say it has been cool to meet some great people and to have been afforded some really cool opportunities by God's grace. And so I can receive the fact that, like, yeah, I think God's been good and opened doors, and that's been really cool. What's been hard? I mean, there's a lot of things that have been hard. I think part of it is, and you know my backstory, Adam. Like, there was a
Yep.
season of my life where I was just like radically underdeveloped and overexposed. So like my character just didn't keep pace with my influence. That really got me in trouble. Um, I got fired from a job when I was 27 years old. It was just really public. It wasn't like I didn't do anything malicious or intentional, but it was careless and casual and just silly, and so it was just very public. And it was because I think my life was just moving too fast, and so I'm guarded against. I had a pastor friend tell me recently. I called him. It was like middle of the day, and I'm like, "Hey, bro, like I didn't expect to catch you." And this pastor friend suffered from moral failure. Very well known pastor that probably everybody listening would know. And I said, I didn't expect to catch you. It's noon on like a Tuesday or whatever. And he's like, "Oh, dude, you can always catch me." He's like, I can't ever be too busy, because if I'm too busy, I'll go back to where I was. And I'm like, wow. And so the pace that I'm running at times, I probably need to just pay really close attention to that. Because there's the pace that I'm running at, and then there's like the Jesus pace, which is a lot slower and a lot more deliberate. So that's the challenging part, is just, how do you show up for people, be present, most importantly in your walk with Jesus, but also like with my wife, with my children. Saying no has always been a challenge. But yeah, anyway,
That's really good. How do you discern this is what I'm supposed to be doing? So I have a really good friend whose speaking engagements right now are just exploding. He's like, in this year ahead, Adam, I have all my calendar's already full. And yet he's kind of questioning all of it. So I was like, well, that might be a problem for this coming year if all those are solidified already. And we both talked. I know for me, I'm really called to pastor Embrace really well. Mm-hmm. So if there's an engagement, whether it's Eagle Brook up in the cities, I'll say yes every time I can. Chapel for the Minnesota Vikings, because I can take my son with. Yes, anytime I can. But away from that, I pretty much say no to everything. So I've just kind of discerned that. I'm asking for yourself, Jordan, but also I think everybody can relate with this. How do you discern this is what I'm supposed to be doing? How have you discerned that specifically, in hopes that whoever's listening can take from that?
What I've tried to get better at is like believing that God can make things really black and white. And I think in my own pride and ego, I've tried to set up like frameworks for myself of like, here's how I make decisions, and this is like the filter that I run it through. And I think there can be wisdom in that, like having filters and having frameworks. But like sometimes because of the filter and the framework, I'm guilty of not saying like, hey, Lord, like, what do you think? And I want to hear from you. Like I want to put this before you, and I want you to say yes or no to it, because you can do that. And I want to believe that you're a God that can do that, and you can make things black and white. And so like, let me lay down my filter and framework for a second. And is there a reason that you want me to do this that I might not be aware of? Or is there a reason that you don't want me to do this that I might not be aware of? Because sometimes, like in our world, Adam, and I'm in in the marketplace in the secular world. Like sometimes it's as simple as like, well, the fee's really big,
Yep.
or it doesn't take long to get there, or the audience is huge. And like those aren't great reasons to say yes to a speaking engagement. It's got to be part of the reason. But so I think for me, it's like hearing from God. Somebody said the other day, like, how do you hear from God? It's like, well, like you spend time with him, And
Yeah.
so like in my walk, like I've got to slow down and spend more time with Jesus so that I can hear from him. Cause it's like, I don't know, if you want to hear from your wife, it's like, well, you can hear from her, you can hear from Becky because you spend time with her. So you know her voice, right? And like, you know what she wants and what she doesn't want and what she'd say yes to and no to. And so in the same way, it's like, am I spending enough time with Jesus such that I can hear his voice clearly? And then am I trusting him that he can make things black or white? So I'm not perfect at that. I still screw it up a lot. And my own pride and ego tends to lean toward like my filter and my framework. But I want this next year to be a year of trusting that God can make things black or white.
Ooh, that's really, really good. Last question. Is there anything else in this season? Again, I'm bragging on you. Anything else that you're learning about yourself or about God in this season of seeing his hand all over you right now?
I've been working through this, like Matthew 18 has been heavy on my heart. I was working through this with the guy who mentors me and disciples me. And we were just talking through like, this story when the disciples asked Jesus, like, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And by the way, this is so fun so like if you're a parent listening or you ever work with kids in any capacity, teacher, coach, whatever, parent, ask a group of kids, say, hey, who's the GOAT? And, because kids are funny, so they just say hilarious things. You don't even give them like the topic or category, like Caitlin Clark. It's like, what if we're not talking sports? Like, you don't even know. Who's the GOAT? They just yell a name out, and then they'll have debates and they'll get distracted. And you're like, but I'm still here, and so Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, whatever. So it's a fun one. And then you say, okay, well, outside of sports, like of anybody who ever walked like the planet, like who do you think the GOAT was? And then somebody says, well, Jesus, I think Jesus is the GOAT. They kind of get, God or Jesus, like, isn't he the GOAT? Like, okay, yeah, like Jesus is the GOAT. Okay, here's another question. Who did Jesus say the GOAT was? And now it gets complicated, right? Because people are like, well, but isn't it Jesus the GOAT? Like, is it God or Jesus? Like, how does that work? Or you'll have one kid that's like David or whatever. I was like, I don't know, just funny. They just say funny stuff. And but then you can turn to Matthew 18 and say, well, let's see what Jesus said about who the GOAT was, who was the greatest. And so the story, right? And Jesus grabs the child and places the child among them. And the scripture says, he says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like this child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And so, back to your question, I think like I'm learning a lot about like humble dependence. And part of that goes back to the earlier response of like trusting that God can make things black and white. Like, am I humbly dependent on the Lord in a childlike way? Because children, apart from mom and dad and the support of others, are helpless. Like our little guy Mac is 2 years old. Like he would just lose his life if not for me and Ashley. And do I trust God? Do I lean on God that way? And so many days the answer is no. And I just think God's calling me into that, and I'm working on that. So that's something I'm learning.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I just thanks for letting me drill down on some of that too, because I think it's always easier with all those questions to kind of have this like, oh, if I could have that, everything would be perfect. Mm-hmm. And then you have those seasons where God's hand is on your life and you're like, okay, it is amazing. And yet there's also a lot of hard, challenging things. And so thanks for letting me just drill down on that, Jordan.
Can I throw that back on you? I mean, I want to hear. Yeah. What are you learning? What's the thing that God's teaching you right now?
Oh, what's God teaching me right now? It sounds, I'm going to sound like a pastor. Apart from me, you can do nothing, Adam. I'm driven. I'm passionate. Strategy is what I love. And yet, if my hand is not a part of it, if I'm not the foundation, it either won't work or it won't matter. And even worse, to have it work but not matter, Right. It's like, oh gosh, Lord. I'm like, don't, So God's been challenging me with that. And then he's just been, I just with the loss of my brother, it'll be 2 years coming up. I find myself thinking and dreaming a whole lot more about heaven, if I'm being honest, and wanting my life, this life, to matter when I look back on it at the end. And still be able to say, yeah, gosh, you ran such a good race and it mattered. You weren't successful at things that didn't matter, basically, you know? So I think I've been learning that. And then I mean, it's so fun right now. The church is just really, really just flourishing. And it's so wonderful to know in my heart of hearts that it's not me. You know, people might thank me. Hey, Adam, you've changed my life. And I'm like, gosh, isn't the Lord good? I'm like, I can't bring Jesus up fast enough. Because I'm like, you follow me, I'm going to disappoint you every single day of the week. You follow him, he just gets more wonderful and beautiful and more powerful. And, you know, it's like, I'm like, follow him, don't follow me. So that's some of the things that I've been learning just in this season. And it's even in my quiet time, like, again, I'm going to sound like a pastor. I feel like I can't spend enough time. I'm reading through Genesis right now, and I'm just loving it. And then my prayer times, like, have just been really, really, like, fulfilling. And it's like, gosh, my best friend, Tyler Goff, what's the best thing I could pray for him? What's the best thing I can do for that person? Pray for him. And so it's just been so cool just to see God work in different people's lives, and just to actually want to pray instead of it feeling like something you should do. So that's long answer long. That's what I've been learning lately.
Oh, dude, that's so good. That's so good. Love Tyler. Shout out Tyler.
Shout out to Tyler.
I don't know if like you know him, but I know he's just a wonderful dude. Great leader.
Such a good guy.
And dude, it's also been cool to see Embrace flourish and to see the work that God, like even just from afar, like to see the work that God's doing to Embrace. And I'm encouraged by you and your leadership, man. Well, hey, one question for you on eternity. Have you seen the rope illustration? Are you familiar with that?
Like the rope and kind of like tearing it, or
like Francis Chan does the rope illustration where he's got like the red tape.
I have seen this. Isn't
that cool? Like,
so like another version that I've seen, so kind of a similar version I've seen, and he didn't start it, but Jason Van Ruler. I don't know if you know Jason. Jason Van Ruler, somebody you need to know, Jordan.
Okay, all right.
Seriously, shout out to Jason Van Ruler. Go find him on Instagram if you're not following him already. So he spoke to our staff, and again, he said, "I'm not the one who created this, but you know, you kind of figure out what your age is and where you're currently at and how much you have left." So I got that on my desk, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, Lord, I only got this much longer. But then that analogy from Francis Chan too, so good.
Yeah, because it just has you think about your existence in a completely different way and like how we prioritize. And Francis would say like, it's crazy that our culture has like, because it's like the 1 foot of red tape, right? And he's like, just imagine this rope goes on forever, but like the first foot of it is red. And so he's like, you know, this signifies life. And then he gets in this Francis Chan way, right? And he's far more articulate than I am, but he's like, you know, we think like if we don't, you know, get the certain grade, then we don't get into the certain school. We don't do the certain interview, we don't get the certain job or whatever, right? And he just goes through these, and he's like, and then it's just, then we don't have this, and so this. He's like, wait a minute. He's like, if you don't get this right, like the foot, right? He's like, then all of this is changed, and it's this really simple illustration that's pretty profound of like, man, so that's been resting on me too, like the thought of eternity and how we're storing up treasure here versus treasure on earth. And I love that that's resting with you. And I was heartbroken for you to watch you go through that with your brother.
Yeah.
And again, I watched it from afar, but I know how close you were. And I saw some of the pictures that were posted when you were like little boys and all the memories that you have together. And I know that you're still close, just even, you know, knowing that he's in heaven and dancing with Jesus. But thanks for sharing that, man. I've been thinking about eternity too. And I think some of the silver lining, right? And like how God works is like, your brother's race and now his time with Jesus is forcing you to think about
Yeah.
time with Jesus, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
last thing on this, I interviewed a guy named Sandy Miller, who was the pastor before Nicky Gumbel at HTB Church in London, this legendary church. And so I asked Sandy, because he's got to be in his late 80s, early 90s, if he was excited about heaven. And he said, in the thickest British accent, well, that's where all my family and friends are, you know?
wow.
And you could see this deep joy in even how he said it. And I was like, man, I want that. Like
Yeah.
I was like, he said, away from worrying about what might take place for my wife, that's where I want to be. You know, there's this like, oh my gosh, like, so and and one last story. There, a legendary guy in our state is named Gordy Fosness. He brought FCA to South Dakota years and years ago. And I'll never forget being in his hospice room. Even when he couldn't speak anymore, there was so much joy and peace in the room. If you could bottle it up, you'd be a billionaire because you'd just sell it in jars to people. But even the hospice nurse, I'll never forget walking out, and she wasn't just saying it to encourage me. She's just like, the joy and peace in that room is crazy, isn't it?
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. And just to have that heart that points that way is awesome.
Wow.
Jordan, last thing I want to talk to you about encouragement. As we wrap up a year, start a new one. First off, the art of encouragement. Why is it the art? That's kind of a unique word to use. Like why is it the art of encouragement? And maybe start. So why the art, and what's the power of encouragement before we get to the practical stuff?
Okay, well, part of it is I think encouragement is a topic that we think about, like from a personal development, leadership development standpoint. We tend to think about encouragement as something we just either do or don't do.
It's good.
And I think the reality is, like a lot of things, it's an art and science. Like if you get around a world-class encourager, somebody who's really good at leading, moving people, inspiring people, making people feel a certain way. Like, so this is Adam Weber. I'm going to make you feel awkward. This is you. You're really good at this. If somebody were to study the way that you interact with people, there's actually a lot of nuance that goes into how you connect with the world around you. And so the point is, it's more of an art and a science than something you just either do or don't do.
It's good.
And so we wanted to break that down, not because we have all the answers and it's like, well, let us teach you about encouragement, but rather because we've been encouraged. I've been encouraged and started to study some world-class encouragers just to say like, hey, there's some things that they're doing that not everyone is doing. And I think if we paid attention to that, we would make people feel welcomed, invited, included, empowered, loved, seen, noticed, understood, cared for. And, it's this old Maya Angelou quote, right? Like people don't always remember what you did or what you said, but they will remember the way that you made them feel.
No joke.
And so much of leadership is how we make people feel, whether you're leading a church, leading in a community, leading in your place of work. And the final thing I'll say is like, I don't think it's not just like the right thing to do. It's like, I want to be clear. I think this is a strategy for leading people that helps you retain better people, grow people, get better results, right? Like build a culture. So this is attraction, retention, productivity.
Yep.
It's a strategy for winning with people, at the end of the day.
That's
why it's the art.
That's so good. The power, like, is any way to explain more of the power of encouragement? Like what's the secret power? Like why is it so powerful or important?
Yeah, I'll underscore it this way. I'll share a couple like studies for the logical people, right? Because I think sometimes people can get around people like us, Adam, and they're like, those guys are just like feelers, and they just encourage everyone, like,
oh gosh,
lives for everybody. And then somebody listening that's like, okay, I was in for like the faith conversation. Now we're talking about encouragement. I'm ready to tune out. All right. So if you're logical, stay with me. Okay. This is where you might find some value. Okay. So Harvard Business Review released this study. I think about that every time I talk about this topic. I'm like, I know there's somebody in the room that wants me to shut up. Okay. I want to speak to that person. So Harvard Business Review released a study They interviewed 4,000 recent college graduates, all of whom had one thing in common. They took a job and then they quit within the first 12 months of graduating from school. So different industries, different types of jobs, but they took a job, they quit within 12 months. They interviewed these students, recent college graduates, and they asked them, why did you quit your first job? They gave them a whole list of answers: lack of upward mobility, lack of pay, lack of autonomy, lack of culture. Like, why did you walk away from your job in the first 12 months?
Yep.
This is alarming. 79% of the recent college graduates interviewed, 4,000 of them, 79% had the same leading answer. And it was lack of appreciation.
Whoa.
And so they were really saying, like, I didn't feel known. I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel understood. Like, I didn't feel appreciated. And so I think to press upon this point of like, why is it important? Like, because at the end of the day, so much of leadership is how we make people feel. Brett Steinbarger did a study. Craig Rochelle turned me on to this. He interviewed a bunch of America's top CEOs.
Yep.
And he asked them the question, where do you need to grow in your leadership? Top two answers. Number one was finance. Number two is technology. So I want to have a better understanding of the finances in our organization. And then number two is I need to understand how technology is impacting our organization.
Yep.
Brett and his team then interviewed the leaders that worked with the CEO. And they asked them the question, where does your CEO need to grow in their leadership?
Oh, no.
Guess what they did not say? Anything about finance or technology. That was not in the conversation, you know? And so, but here's what they did say. Number one was communication. Number two is emotional intelligence. And what we know about communication and emotional intelligence is both of those topics are rooted in feel. It's rooted in how we make people feel, how people experience us. People don't always remember what you said or did, but they do remember the way that you made them feel. And so if you're going to lead a church, lead a company, lead any group of people, paying really close attention to how you're making people feel when you're in their presence, I think is an important task for a leader.
That's so good. In this new year, how specifically for the non-person, I love that you acknowledge the people are probably like, the two of you just need to shut up. Elephant
in the room for this episode.
For that person who it doesn't come naturally for, one or two practical things that they can do to be better encouragers. Like if it doesn't come naturally, how do I begin to implement it? Whether I'm a business leader, a nurse, banker, like how do I do that?
Yeah, so this is so foundational, but I'm going to say it anyway. First off, I really believe this, Adam. I think encouraging people isn't about a style. It's really about a choice. Everybody knows how to do it. So some people will say, well, like, that's just not my style. Okay, let me push back on that. If you knew that somebody you really loved and cared about was living their last day on earth, do you think you'd find a way to encourage them? Well, of course you would. Or you find out like one of the people you care about so much is going through a really rough day. Do you think you'd find a way? Like, yeah, like, so the point is we all know how to do it. We can all speak the language of encouragement and we can all understand it, which means we don't really need anything like super complicated or fancy. So I'm just going to give a couple really simple things. One would be the who over the do. The application of this is encouraging people for who they are instead of what they do. And this is especially true like with our children or our spouse, the people closest to us, because too many times we make assumptions.
It's great.
But they know how we feel about who they are. And I have to catch myself with my kids, like with my daughter the other day at dance. She won a little award. She's 5 years old. And I wanted to really encourage her for like the dance, right? Like you killed it, you won an award. Like, yeah, congratulations on what you did. Instead of saying, Olivia, like, I'm so proud of who you are. You walked up on that stage and you grabbed your medal and you had the biggest smile on your face and you have joy in your heart. You have enthusiasm. And then I loved your humility as you walked off the stage and congratulated your teammates and gave your teacher a hug and like, sis, I see Christ in you. Like I see humility and enthusiasm and joy. And like that comes from Jesus. And I want you to know that as part of who you are. And that would be a much more profound, impactful, meaningful conversation to have with my daughter. But it doesn't matter if you're talking to somebody in the workplace, if you're talking to a child. Here's the point. If you praise someone or encourage someone for what they do, they might remember it. If you encourage somebody for who they are, they'll never forget it. And for anybody listening, think back to the most encouraging conversation you had with like a parent, a mentor, a coach, a teacher. Go back to childhood. It's almost a guarantee that the conversation that stood out most to you is when someone spoke something over you or into you that had far more to do with who you are than what you did.
That's good.
Like somebody pulled you aside, probably said, Adam, you know what? Like you're a really gifted communicator. Like, I don't know God's plans for you, but I bet it involves communicating on some level because man, that's a supernatural gift of yours. Like there was probably a conversation like that existed in your past. And they weren't saying like, great job, Adam, on the award of communication.
Yep.
It was like, oh man, this is part of who God made you to be. So that's one is who over the do. The second one.
I literally had my pastor who led me to Christ tell me that as a sophomore in high school.
Wow.
He pulled me aside and said, Adam, I want you to know, I think you have a gift.
Yeah.
And I asked, what do you mean? And he said, I'm not fully sure, but I want you to know you have a gift.
Wow.
I came back from a camp, a retreat at Wheaton College, and 2 or 3 of the high school students shared that Sunday, and he sought me out specifically and told me that. So I just literally, that's exactly what was.
Isn't that cool? And it's cool. You can recall that like in a moment, like on a dime. You're like, I remember it. It was profound. I knew where I was. I knew how I felt. And it was like, yeah, it was who you were that he was really acknowledging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for anyone, I think part of this is just acknowledging who Christ is in someone. You know, that's all it is. It's just pay attention to the gifts that someone was given. So it's who over do.
Just love that.
By the way, results are still important. I'm not minimizing that.
Yep.
So we need to praise people for accomplishment, result. That's important too. I just think let's also do a good job of who over the do. And I think who is more important than do. Number 2 would be another maybe just practical one for listeners is the why before the what, or the why attached to the what. So we live in a culture where we do a lot of like, add a baby, way to go, Adam, you're like, how many times have you been told, Adam, I really loved your sermon today?
A whole bunch.
And then sometimes somebody will go a little bit further. And then sometimes they won't. But I bet it means more to you when somebody says, hey, Adam, I loved your sermon today. What I sensed is the Holy Spirit moving through you, specifically when you were talking about Ephesians 6 and you got into talking about the armor of God. Man, I've been going through something, and that specific passage really touched me about God's protection and the armor. I mean, that touched me. And isn't that so much better than like, hey, Adam, great sermon today?
Oh, there's a gal. Well, on that, I had a gal. I was sitting in a coffee shop last Friday, and a gal next to me. I didn't recognize her. About 10 minutes after I was sitting there, she's like, I don't want to interrupt you. This last message series was incredible. And then she began to tell about why specifically it connected with her. I'm like, filled my cup, like overflowing 10 times more than the, hey, that was great. That was great, you know?
Yes. It's just being a little more intentional and a little more specific about the why attached to the what. And so I think that's a game changer. I think people feel it so much more authentically when we just give them, and it doesn't have to be this like fancy diatribe. It's just give them a sentence, give them a 1 or 2 bullet points. Like, I appreciate you because you do this and this really well. Hey, that was one of my favorite sermons because you did this and this, or I experienced that. And it just changes the way that people will receive your encouragement.
So good. Really quick on that, to any dads listening, just really challenge you and encourage you to do exactly what Jordan just said with each of your kids. Specific moms as well. There's something about dad saying stuff, specifically if dads aren't wired like Jordan and I, that is just a powerful thing that your kid will never forget. Last thing I have, Jordan, 2 people who are currently big encouragers in your life, like right now, kind of as we speak in this season. Is there 2 people that come to mind?
Oh man, there's so many people. I mean, my kids encourage me. My wife is a great encourager in her own way. I'm married to a very logical. I'm emotional. My wife is logical. She encourages in her own way, as do my kids. There's a guy who mentors me and disciples me. His name is Dale Mulliken. And I think what I'm learning also from Dale is that sometimes encouragement is challenging.
Ooh.
Like I don't want to paint this picture that like encouragement's always this warm fuzzy thing where we tell people what they want to hear. Like sometimes to encourage someone, you almost got to call them up. And it's like not accepting the current version of who they are. Like I see more in you. I think
I
you're better
love
than that.
that. I love that.
I think you have more potential. I think, I think you can rise above this. I said to Dale one day, I was having a heavy morning. We sat down at Dunn Brothers Coffee Shop in North Liberty, Iowa, crack our Bible. And I look at Dale. Dale's in his early 60s, really wise guy. And he's just loved on me so well. For like 3 years, we've met about every couple weeks and just listens and teaches me things. And I said, Dale, today I just need to be encouraged. And he said, Jordan, I'm not going to do that. He's like, dude, no. He's like, what we can do is like go to God's word. This is not, a self-help. This is not a personal development session. Like we're going to read God's word. And I was like, okay, and so I think that day we read Ephesians 6, and it was like, I can either try to encourage you with like my thoughts and my opinion, or I can take you to God's word and remind you of some promises, and it might hurt a little bit, but you're protected, you're set apart, you're better than this, and you don't need another human. Now, sometimes God uses people, so I don't want to minimize that either.
Yep.
But in that moment, he was saying, I want to give you something so much better. Can I just call you up and smack you for a little bit? Like, I want to give you something so much better than like warm, fuzzy words. So Dale is one. Okay. Have you met Chad Johnson? You know Chad Johnson?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Man, Chad is like, okay, so I had this really great moment with Chad. I think about Chad and I laugh. Chad is like us. He's just like high fives for everyone. We're at an event. I'm like MC and host at this event, and Chad's there to kind of support John Maxwell. For listeners, Chad is John Maxwell's chief of staff, so he travels with John a lot. Anyway, we're at this event, and we're sitting in the back, and it's John Gordon, Ed Milet, John Maxwell are kind of the featured speakers, and I'm just there to like make that, I guess, and then get off the stage, right? That's kind of my role. So I get off the stage. I'm like sitting in the back with Chad, and I look at my jacket. You ever had a day where like you wear something, you're like, why did I wear this? Like it's just like it doesn't match, or like what was I thinking when I put this on? It's kind of one of those days. And so I look at Chad, and I'm like, dude, do you like this jacket? Like I'm like, I don't know why I wore this. It doesn't look good. And he looks at me. He says, dude, you look really good in green. You look really good in green. And I was like, man, you are so full of it. Like, I do not look good in green. Stop that. It's like when you play golf with somebody and you have a really bad shot and they're like, well, at least it didn't go in the water. It's like, well, it's behind a tree. Like, it's not, like, what are you talking about? And so now I give Chad, but here's what Chad does. Chad literally has this unique supernatural ability to see the best in everyone and everything. Oh. And so I do think he was trying to kind of gas me up in a Chad Johnson sort of way about my green jacket. But I really do think he has this ability to like look for the best in people and in situations that aren't so great. Oh. And I really do think great encouragers do that. I think they have a willingness to put a 10 on your forehead on the days when you're a 2. And that is hard to do. It's really hard to do with imperfect people who screw up and make mistakes. And so Dale Mulliken, Chad Johnson, in 2 completely different but really awesome ways.
That's fantastic. For me, really quick, there's a gal named Jessie in our church. She's an older African-American woman, and she gives me hugs that only an older gal like herself can do. And every single time she says that I am blessed and highly favored by God. And I'm like, I will receive that. For everybody else is probably like, okay, who is this gal? But honestly, it's just her each week coming up and blessing me and speaking into my life. The other thing she tells me, Adam, I wouldn't trade you for $1 million. Because she says, because you can lose $1 million, but you can't lose you. And so I'm like, oh, Jesse, I feel so loved. And then the other person I just got to really honor is Bob Merritt, longtime pastor at Eagle Brook Church in the cities. Bob, what's powerful about him is, he doesn't use his words flippantly. He's very direct. And so you will know where you stand with Bob Merritt the moment you're before him. And so to hear him say today, he texted me again, just as he did yesterday and just as he did the day before, Adam, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. I just listened, again, it was very specific. I just listened to this interview between you and Tom Patterson, and it was so good. Thank you so much for that. And I listened to you and Bob Goff. Gosh, I know why you do what you do. And the same on Sundays. I just watched The Message. Adam, gosh, that one illustration was just lightning. And I'm like, Bob Merritt, he's listening to my messages. Like, Jesus, take me now. And so I thank God for Jesse and for Bob. And so those are my two people as well.
It's awesome, dude. Isn't it fun? It's fun to reflect on the people that fill you up, make you feel a certain way. Shout out Bob, Jesse, Dale, Chad. Hey, dude, shout out you, bro. I have so much fun laughing with you. Gosh. And I want people to hear this. Here's part of what's unique about your podcast. And this is just a lesson. This is a good leadership lesson. You never take yourself too seriously. And I've been on a lot of podcasts. I both kind of live in this podcast world where we share conversations. I love that you're just like, so we're just talking offline. And then you just start recording. There's really never now we're doing this. It's just a natural, organic, authentic conversation. And you let people, first off, you're an amazing question asker, and you just let people share, and you do it in such an organic and thoughtful way. So I love being your friend, man. And every time we talk, it's like we pick up where we left off, and you're just a big blessing in my life, man. I want you to hear that.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation between Jordan and I. Jordan, I love you so much. I appreciate you big time. Prayed for you and your wife again this morning. So I'm grateful for you. Thanks to our partners, Mission Haiti. I love Mission Haiti, mission-haiti.org. Go find out more about sponsoring a child, and then Vern Ide Mitsubishi. Go to vernide.com. Get yourself a vehicle. Lastly, thanks to all of you who listen to the conversation. I don't take it lightly. Have a great rest of your day.